Peace, peace, peace. Wasn't here last week. Work, but it's a little chaotic for me, my schedule at the beginning of the school year, but should be regular soon. Where I'll be here around this hour, around this time. I'm going to be here for about an hour with you all. Um, a good day. Today's the October 2nd. It's my youngest daughter's born day, so had a great time last night and today. Um, um, so I'm in a good mood. But as all of my children are getting older, today's the wisdom day. And I think about this day a lot because my my youngest daughter, whose born day is today, Alma, right? If you know who Alma is. Um, October 2nd happens to be the born day of Nat Turner and Mahatma Gandhi. As an aside, I think it's incorrect in baby scholarship and YouTube scholarship when people say that Gandhi was racist, though. I think that's sloppy. I think that's sloppy scholarship. You know, here's why: the man has a long autobiography. There's long details about his life, and then also the stuff about like the odd sexual things you do, like try to sleep in bed naked, whatever it is, right? I think this, right? If you study the history of Indian spirituality and their gurus and all that, you can't get an understanding about them, like useful understanding. I'm not saying agree or disagree. A useful understanding. And this is an aside, but I like to go on an aside. Um, if you don't understand it, the point of ascetic rituals and their religiosity and why we're so against religion is because they do things that we don't do. They do things in a way that we don't really advocate. You know what I mean? And that's the same thing I would say there. I'm not justifying it. I'm saying, but to say that he was racist though is a bad timeline though, and it doesn't show like how people change and how they deal with new insights and understand that a lot of our own people, when we don't have knowledge of self, we do a lot of things that are racist out of reaction. You know what I'm saying? The the black American that is angry at all the Latinos, though, even the ones that didn't do anything, or the Latinos that have issues because they've been taught to self-hate certain things. So they hate the blacks more because they'll see black Americans and they love the skin that they're in, the features that they're in. That bothers them because they were taught that that's not to have and disgusting and this and that, right? These are all psychoses. The reason I say that is because Gandhi's life in the beginning, he was of the British Crown. He was a lawyer, and he was appalled that he could be treated like a black person when he was in South Africa. So his reasoning was very condescending and all of that. But what people don't get is that when he was locked up in South Africa, he started to slowly see things differently. And when he left, he started to delve it more and more, seeing the contrast when he got back to India of how he really was treated and what he really is. So how can a man be completely, really not have the chance to allow a knowledge of themselves and the surroundings to adjust to their reality? Doesn't make a person wholly perfect. Certainly does not. You know, just like we love Boricua's love as we should, Pedro Albizu Campos, you know, the great revolutionary for Puerto Rican independence. But his vision of a free Puerto Rico was very Catholic. And so even though he would be classified as an Afro Latino, he actually was very pro Euro, pro Euro culture, meaning Spaniard culture and all that. So he had a lot of his vision. The more you would see what his vision of what an ideal free Puerto Rico was, it was like whatever the Spanish made up to that point is what we should be. So it's also things. It doesn't mean that we say Pedro Bizu Campos was some kind of sellout. These are their perspectives, you know. So again, um, we have to understand the perspectives. But me thinking of my child having a born day that is shared with Nat Turner and Gandhi, I think immediately. Of course, you would have to think immediately of the two poles of violence for freedom, Nat Turner, and nonviolence for freedom. You know, and I always, I think I wouldn't want any of us to be thinking that it's one or the other. I also wouldn't want us to be thinking it's got to be something middle. What I'm saying is, I think we need to be thinking in such a way where we are creating what ought to be and what must be at the time, right? And no matter what, for all types of freedom, there must be a violence, intense action to destroy all that is most vicious that affects us. And because we're five percenters, though, understand that we are very violent inwardly. You know, I noticed that because I made a mistake today that really wasn't my own fault, but it was the one that made the mistake, and I was very, very angry about it. You know, I was really, really angry about it because it's my daughter's birthday, and it really was messing up the last couple of hours I had with her before I had to bring her back to her mother, and it just upset me a lot. And then I was, and I was thinking like how much calm and control I have in the face of many things, but when it comes to my own performance, we could be very violent toward each other. And what happens is 5%ers though, when we talk to each other about what we expect out of each other, this is why we tend to be very violent. I don't mean fighting and everything. I mean like violent toward each other, like attacking and vicious toward the completion of tasks. You know what I mean? Bombing. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. That's what I mean. And I don't think it's something to get rid of. I don't. I think it's something uh, um, to to make more um, sane, to make more healthy. You know, to not lose that intensity, but to make it more healthy. You know, I hope this makes some kind of sense. But it's why I call the classroom session today the way. Excuse me. My brother Day's son is when he lights up incense, it's never one. It's always an army of incense. So it is what it is. That's my brother. You know. So I might cough a little bit. You know what I mean, all right. So here's what I was thinking. Piece of David Allen, right? Self elevation piece. Um, what I find interesting about the way is that as humans, as original people, the entire history, of literature has really been often guided spiritually, not by telling us what to do for something. The idea of Christianity and stuff is a very new way, but the real thing is I love to study the ancient texts of all the original cultures because they always have their thought about the way. And we're really going back in time and reading the ways of learned men over years and years of experience, the accumulation of experiences of others, right? And once you see um, the different styles, the different recommendations, we're basically seeing a history of spirituality that essentially is based on what is the way. You know, for the Taoists, though, very, very relatable to us 5%ers. Very relatable to me as a 5%er who's a martial artist in Chinese Kung Fu is the Taoist literature. You know, the Tao Te Ching, the way in its power, right? So the Tao means the way. The pinyin would spell it T-A-O. Some old spellings spell it D-A-O as it is sounded. But the way in its power is wisdom power to me. And I used to, always be open on that concept. And it's a book I read once a year. You know what I mean? I want to put that on pause and get these bikes behind the gate. And you know what's interesting, right? When we look at the realities about the way, we're basically looking at wisdom. In other words, can a person's way, their manners of how they move, 100% completely reflect the knowledge that they have? One's culture is the lived understanding you have. The understanding is what you have actually known, come to know, it is known and used, right? That means that the culture and the way is interchangeable in this sense, right? For our vantage points, right? Peace to Malik, right? It's interchangeable in that sense, you know? What I also find interesting, right, is I had this, I had this build. I'm gonna share it with you now, right? So it has a context. I'm literally gonna open up. And I shared this on a song, right? So my first solo album was The Zen of Us. And thank you, God. Sure. And on the title track, The Zen of Us, I in the second verse, I wrote about my 3 perfect principles plus lesson. Okay. I'm gonna write that out. It's very short. It's just something I had in all the years training in martial arts, and I was thinking about how to equate. And it also was written about in the book, The Zen of Us, in certain sections, right? And this idea of living out what you know and see completely. See, sometimes people see it as devilishment, but the act of being able to live out exactly what your understanding is the great difficulty between the mental and the physical world. You know, it's kind of like that thing. I gotta look this up again, but it might be. I think I know what book is it, but there's a martial arts concept that you have an idea of how you think you move. So right now, I don't have an idea. I'm moving, and it's exactly the way I'm thinking because I'm seeing myself, right? But let's say when you're moving without, like let's say you're recording yourself, you can't see the recording, and you're moving, and you think of yourself. And this is why when I share videos, I haven't done it in a while because I just don't share. But I record myself, and I usually delete the video. And unless I share something, I delete the video. If it was really dope, I might share it, and it might get people to read more of my work or whatever, or even if I'm trying to train more people. But the original benefit was I was like, I don't really know if I look the way I think I look. So I had trained for a lot of years, and I went from being a young martial artist, 20s, mid 20s, and now I was like nearing 40. And I was like, there's a lot of things I don't do anymore because they're athletically difficult, but not really because they were athletically difficult, but because they're not useful. So did I just get less athletic and stuff? So this is what I was thinking. And I started recording myself, and I have a vision. I have a vision of what I think I look like. And when I see myself, I'm like, ah, damn, that's not the way. Ooh, this, and I was seeing a lot of mistakes, you know. And I had taught quite a few people martial arts then, and I was like, I have to teach myself again now. I have to teach myself again, right? And with that said, the main thing that I got out of that was like what I saw that in my mind wasn't exactly what was happening. So I had to get more knowledge to allow the way that I was living, right, to better reflect the real understanding that I have. It wasn't completely reflecting the understanding, right? And I realized that all of it wasn't just physical. It wasn't all physical. The repairs and stuff that were really vital weren't really, um, they really weren't physical. You know what I'm saying? Um, or that was of a difficult nature because some of it was because I was a slightly not at the right body fat percentage and stuff. You know? No, that's peace. You can close it. And, and so my thing is this: like, what are some of the things to develop the way, right? What are some of the things to better see how we actually live? Like, how do we see ourselves living for? How do we see the culture, right? Is there a way we could see our culture? One of the greatest ways to see our culture is through our works. And this is why we work hard. What are the works out there? You know, the 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 works that I put here. How am I sharing with you all? Right? The martial arts I'm training in, I watch the recordings, right? There it is, right? Um, and then the written word. Why? Even if you all not gonna be um writers, I would say that word on the paper is going to show you, and I think for everyone, we talk about there's a voice that you have when you're writing, you know what I mean? And whether I write about music or I do music or I make music, my voice is very authoritative and it takes on the voice that I feel most important, which is the voice that I have here sharing. It is, I would like it to be intimate, meaning there is a lot of love shared, but also commanding. What's most sincere in my heart, that combination. Um, but a lot of people have to develop that voice that they're able to speak, and that's why I recommend. I always recommend in the curriculum. We always have our own journal that we have this way of speaking to ourselves and be able to see it out there, where there is a time and a construction of the way that we speak. You see, you could speak to yourself though, even record it on phone. But when you write it out though, there's time for the construction. It's almost each word that you're saying to yourself is now being built. It is being built by the hand and even by the computer, the keyboard. Both count to me, you know? Both count to me. So, excuse me. Um, So I want to focus on some of those things to develop the way, but I also want to go back into what I was talking about, the three perfect principles. I'm going to quote the song, "The Zen of Us." You know what I mean? Um, the lines prior was showing the hells that we go through to be these teachers that share and things like that. And I said through it, we uphold three perfect principles to all the disciples' discipline: originality, content of worth expressed in sublime creativity. That's the first one. Honor, in the word is bond, so the bond is life, all activity, right? And full of rightness, where understand is the natural conductivity of our likeness, right? And I think in this, the way, these perfect principles were all a manner of the way that we behave to the outside world. That everything I share would be a content of worth, but also creative, meaning original to me. That I would deal with all things in a manner of honor, where my word is bond, and bond would be life. You would see the bond in life, in all activity. But then it's also would kind of merge to be a full uprightness. That term is not my own, uprightness. It's a term that a lot of translated texts in the Tao and in Buddhism, especially Chan Buddhism, and Confucius thought, and Confucius related Neo-Confucian philosophies, is the way that you present yourself. You could present yourself the right way, and that'll seem to work, as Confucius said. But the real idea was to be able to present yourself in a correct manner that truly was the manner of what you are. You know, it really is you. And sometimes, like the Sufis say, you wear the garment, you wear the garments, you know, of the said being you intend to be. The garments of this, the garments of the Sufi, the Sufic order, the garments of the martial artist, the garments of whatever it is you're upholding, right? The garments of the low life, right? Whatever it is, right? But essentially, whatever principles and ideals that you are intending to represent, if you would, at, at most, you would achieve it in some way where the garments are not necessary to reflect that. You see? So among the people, they might see me, oh, he represents the low lives, but the principles of love and loyalty and the hip hop creativity, that's what people are seeing more down the line. That's certainly what the other low lives would see. The intention is right. We wear 1,000 universal flags and stuff, right? A lot of times I wear the flag to promote it because I don't need to wear it to remind myself that I'm the God. But in the beginning, you kind of do, you know. Now you wear it because you love to show that if anybody values and respects the actions that I am taking outside in this world, then I want them to also know that these are actions of a 5% of true and living God, of the 5% nation of gods and earth. Right? Um, so that's why I made that full of men's. I'm gonna put that into a piece. I write a little bit about it as a little plus lesson and stuff. I'm just really behind in work, so I'm trying to finish so many things and projects and stuff. I've just been a little bit slow, um, but they will get there when they get there. you know, um, um, there's just so much to do. I there were so many years as a writer where I had no work, nothing to get my works in, my writings in, and now I live in a delightful dilemma this decade because I finally have the comfort where I say, listen, I figured out how I want to express myself. What I always talked about doing, I did it. And I can express myself in song, thanks to brothers like King Kamal and my True Cipher brothers and so many others, right? And I have all the ways to write down and share my word. But it's a delightful dilemma because there are so many things that have to be done to get it shared. You know what I mean? And a lot of times I would get things done back in the days because there was no chance anybody was going to take my writing. So I don't write. You know, I just keep it in the journal, and then lots of other moments are just you're just holding ideas. You're in a holding pattern. That holding pattern is no more. You know, um, the only holding is that I funnel everything to make it the best work possible. So I don't throw a million albums out there. I don't throw 1,000 books, even though it feels like to people I'm throwing out 1,000 books, but it's not. You know, but how can we uphold the way? You know, I'm forgetting his name though, but he's like a metaphysicist. Something Phil, not Dr. Phil. Okay, just um, you know when we used to get the tapes of all the scholars and stuff, and the spiritual teacher like Bobby Hemmett. There was one other around that time, and we used to watch all these videos, and it didn't appeal to me after a while because when I first got knowledge, the real ancient text I was immediately drawn into was ancient history of Kemet, of Nubia. That was it for me. Chankanta Diop, Ivan Van Cernima, and anything of that ilk. And then I started to really get into the martial arts, and then the ancient text, but not the ancient. You know, I'm studying more now the histories of ancient China and Japan and stuff. You know, but I was studying more the ancient texts and the philosophies of Taoism and Buddhism and in Buddhism's many forms because it related to my Sigun, who taught me, and I wanted to know what were the philosophical mentalities of those that learned how to fight in the way that I'm learning. What was their way of thinking as far as what was appropriate and inappropriate as a warrior, right? Yeah, and so I started getting into those texts, but so a lot of the guys like the Bobby Hemmets and others, I didn't really appeal to me because it had like it still had a mysterious undertones to me, and I think a lot of those metaphysicists of the 2000s and stuff that leads to a lot of people today on their the universal answer me type stuff. You know what I mean? Right. But that's just my thought. But anyway, one of these metaphysicists who had some good ideas and some bad ideas, and that I disagreed with, he had said something about the whole reason that we are in this human form. And you see the way I'm saying it already. It already sounds stupid. There we go. Yes, yes, Master. Thank you, Phil Valentine. It was Phil Valentine. I knew because then I said Bobby Hemmett. There's only one Phil, and I knew somebody would get it from me, right? So Phil Valentine used to say a lot of crazy stuff, but I've actually gone to Phil Valentine lectures and stuff, So very, 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 positive vibe, and everything. I just don't. I'm not one for the spiritual connections and all that kind of shit. You know what I mean? Like for example, right? My older, she passed away. She returned to the essence. Remember the perfection, my older, right? She's the one that gave me this discipline I have instilled it. She loved birds, and she used to have a pet, a green bird, beautiful, right? Today's my daughter's birthday, and she goes outside on the porch, and there's a little yellow throat bird. Okay, they're kind of greenish though, with a little yellow, very adorable, tiny. And the bird was still, and she goes, "Can I go pet the bird?" And I was like, once we open the door, it's kind of gonna get scared and fly away. That's what I was saying, and I was kind of saying it like, yo, not to not do it, but like, don't get upset if it flies away because it just might be startled by it. So she carefully opened the door, went out to the porch, and kneeled, crouched next to the bird, and the bird still just relaxing there. So she asked me if she could pet it. I said, I'd give it a shot. I mean, if it pecks you, it won't be too bad. It's a real tiny bird. Hopefully it doesn't peck you. She's petting the bird for a while. And the bird eventually flew away and she loved the experience. And people deal with a mystery guy, be like, oh, that was that was your mom, her grandmother, visiting her and stuff. That's how, and of course I don't buy that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I think I deal with the soul, I deal with the mind, and I think it's all connected. And I think it's wonderful that we see a connection like that. But we only see a connection like that because my old earth was very much into nature. She was a super green thumb. She could revive any plant. She was a plant whisperer, you know what I mean? And so she was good with nature as well. And she was great with little kids, you know what I mean? Everything, like ridiculous earth vibe, like everything. And so it just makes sense you would see it though, you know what I mean? And I take it for what it's worth, and I love the connection. But I don't want to piece things together because it's assumptions, And I'm that way with everything else. And when Phil Valentine said one of the reasons we're in human form is so we can see, it wasn't mysterious though. This started to make sense. He said, because we have to find a way to see see us outside of ourselves. And he was saying that's why, and I've heard gods and say that's why the white man was made, so we could see the devilishment that was brewing within us outside of ourselves from a distance, per se, right? That's all speculative, okay? That's all speculative. Just making sure people know how to build the correct way. Just because something fits doesn't mean it's the understanding. This is why it's so hard to live understanding your culture, a complete understanding lived out. Like your culture is a completely 100% lived reality of your understanding. It is a lived reality of your 100% understanding. A lot of times we get 50, 60, 70%, but never 90s, never 95, never 100%. Right? It's because a lot of our understanding is based on things that fit really, really well. That's why I give you the example of my daughter with the bird and then my old earth, because you would see the connection there. My siblings see the connection there because they're a little bit more spiritual in that sense, mystery bound, right? Whereas I'm always thinking, I care about knowledge. You know what I'm saying? I care about knowledge. So much so, I have even been pondering the concept of Jiddu Krishnamurti. Jiddu Krishnamurti used to say that there's an addiction to knowledge too, and that could be your religion. And I was like, yo, if there's anything that Sunnis has as a religion, it's definitely the accumulation of knowledge. You see? It's why I put barriers to how much I read, because then I won't make anything. I won't do anything. Just keep reading. I enjoy it so much, you know? So here's the thing, right? How can we look outside of ourselves? Well, I said, look, writing in your journals, and I make a big thing about writing in your journals about what you're learning, the books you're writing, this and that. And I found in the last couple of times, there has to be a place where you write, where you are honest about your personal feelings, though. I don't care if you burn the book after you wrote it. Some place where you could be honest, though. And I found the worth in that because I've been using the journal more for that as well. You know what I mean? I usually use it. There's so many books I read. I'm using it just for that, and I realize I don't write about my inner thoughts, what I think about things, personal things. You know what I mean? I mean, this year I've been reading long books, very long books, 300, 400 page piece books, very few short, and I still, without even trying, I have 41 already. You know, I always read at least 52. You know, and I'm well on the way, obviously. You know what I mean? And actually, no, I my list says I read 41, but I actually read 42. I finished this book called The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. Very good book. Very good book. And I feel like another book is not here that I read. Yeah. Oh man. Oh yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. So it's not 41. It's 43. Wow. Okay. And guys, I actually spend time for creativity in my downtime instead of just watching films all the time. As my downtime, I've been reading a lot of comics. So I've read about 67 graphic novels, and that I make a list of because one time I was reading a graphic novel and I was like, "Wow, this sounds familiar," and I had already read it already. All right, so let me write those two books that I read. So anyway, right? Um, we want to. One of the things about being a 5% is that we're constantly challenging things. This is why I mentioned the Jito Krishnamurti, the knowledge thing. We're constantly challenging how we view things. Is the way that we're viewing things correctly? You know what I mean? Because we're in a time now where like this is not responsible times. These are times that even when we're responsible for stuff, the highest levels of activism are telling people to stop doing things. You know, and even us as 5%ers, we're not mixed in the activism because we see it as like, well, we're telling people to stop doing things. But I'm going to tell you something. That's what all activism is, though. It's a bunch of people telling people to not do things the way that they're doing them, and that's how you get new ways in. You know, and it's just I know because I'm in a lot of tangents today. I think if you have a young person you're with, your child, um, um, or a young person that you're building with, get them into some type of activism. But get them consciously aware in some kind of way or something. You know, it's important. It's important. All right. So the first thing I had said was one of the things I had said was to have a journal because when you have your journal, your thoughts are being put out there and you're getting to see the application. This takes a lot of honesty. You have to work hard to be honest when you write in your journal. Okay. You have to work hard to see whether you write self deprecating about yourself or if you're painting glossy picture to gloss over real issues that you have to deal with. You see? So, these are things that you have to work on. That you have to work on. And writing the journal is a great way to exercise that. You know what I mean? It's a great way to exercise that. And by the way, the book I mentioned, The 100 Wars on Palestine, is just one of the many books that if you're interested in reading it, I can send it to you. All right. Let's see. All right, so I didn't even read these. True and live in peace. You said peace. The way I used to act when I didn't want to do something, I clearly knew what I had to do, shows that contrast to cultures. My parents made me go anyway. That's a good example. Do the authors of the book see themselves as we do? Um, Malik, you must have asked this a while ago. What book was I talking about? I think that whatever book I was talking about, ancient texts and other books. And the answer is no, no. You know, we cannot say that though, even though there's many similarities. You know, we cannot say that. So when we study ancient texts, the Taoism, the way is a concept. The way is the idea, the nature of what of the righteous nature that is embedded in the individual, that is applied in everything that they do, right? So I would like us to be very articulate, detailed in the way we did with supreme mathematics and say, if wisdom is the way, then what is the way that I compose myself and engage with knowledge? We don't think about this. How do we engage with knowledge and how do we deal with that kind of quest? It's very important. Very important, right? And this is something that you all can write about this. This is something that to me should be an essay that you write about. Whether you share it with me or in journals, it's certainly an assignment because it takes some field study first. You're going to have to go out there. You're going to have to go out there, right? And you're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to really be extra aware of yourself in that moment when engagement with knowledge, pure knowledge, and not opinion or ideas is essential to the decision. How do you conduct yourself when you're in positions where you have to make a decision or have a concept of idea or speak on something, speak on something that you don't have knowledge of? Or there's a discrepancy between the individual you and the individual you're speaking to, and you don't have that. You know that that person isn't dealing with knowledge the way that you are. See, this happens a lot when we teach, though. This is why teaching is such a wonderful way to see things, because I I had encountered that, and I immediately had my daughter. I was saying, "See, we're not dealing with knowledge right now," and I'm commentating to her about what I'm dealing with here. You know, right? Because I'm seeing it right then and there. I'm seeing like, yo, this whatever argument or frustration that's going on here is because I was put into a situation of having to deal with without knowledge. See? And people such can speak in such ways where they speak as if they have knowledge or they're dealing with, or they're sharing the knowledge, the foundation of what should be, and they haven't, you know? So how do we react in situations? When do we engage our knowledge? You see? Where it is critical, where if we don't engage it properly, it's going to take away from what we are, full of brightness. Are we fully engaged in a culture of our manner that it reflects our righteousness, right? Right. This is the thing, right? Okay. I hope that makes sense. Right? Um, and these are things are noticed in certain activities. You know what I mean? Sometimes they're noticed in activities like you could your physical training, like you record yourself lifting weights. See if you get the reps correctly. You know, right? Um, if you do something and you don't really time yourself. You know what I'm saying? See what you're really doing. You know what I mean? Um, collect as much information to get more insight about how you are engaging in things, right? Very, very important. Very important, right? Yeah. So I'm gonna be here for another 13 minutes. Give you guys a full hour. Um, I would like people to email me, Sunyas97 at Gmail. You know what I mean? Um, anybody, but everybody here, like Master, 793rd, True Living. L, you're the one that's emailing me. Great stuff. Great stuff. Um, let me know what you need of me. What would be those next steps you need from me? Or if you even know, I want my time here to be useful. And it's important that if I don't have the majority of my students right now, none of them I'm teaching in the New York City area are coming to the class. They're dealing with me directly. So I come here for people that might walk in and just be a presence at the school as an add-on, um, and then teach online. I want to be useful to everyone and not just be having another wonderful forum to catalog my ideas, no matter how grand anyone would think about them. Um, I would feel it's a waste of time. So I always want to renew, and anyone that really has a concrete way that they could see that, like, yo, as soon as I could use you for this, that, and I will tell you what I can do or how worthwhile it is. Okay. But it is important that in this format, for it to be a class session, you have to engage me outside of the classroom. Okay. In any kind of way. You don't have to be looking. Then again, there's some emails that I haven't answered to. You know what I'm saying? Right? There's some emails that I haven't answered to too because I know somebody asked me for some books and I don't think I got it to them. So I gotta look through. You know what I mean? All right. Good questions for the end of this. If I could elaborate on 14, the 14th letter in the alphabet, now or end. These were ultimatums that the father saw. You know, he didn't want people to respect the idea that things will get done just because we really want them and eventually they will. He wanted people to have an urgency and say, if it is going to be now, then make a plan, make a way to do it, and begin that plan, or it's not. And that ultimately all continuity of life and living is only about those two states. So if we knowledge the culture, right, 1 and 4, there really is only that, right? There really is only, knowledge. There really is only um, what you are doing now that will lead to the future, and or an idea that has come to its end. There's only the two states, you know, only the two states, and none of those other states exist. You know what I mean? None of those other states existed. And if you knowledge the culture, if you knowledge the culture is that, there's great power in that. There's great power in that. In fact, that was a major conversation I was having with the gods here. That some things are not being done when they could be done. And they're in end and they're not now. Right? It's really simple. You know what I mean? And the way I was taught is that that's a contrast. It's a major, major, major contrast. You know what I mean? Right? Quatis, peace, God. It's been a minute. Been a minute, God. All right. Good to see you, God. I hope that answers though. I don't. Let me know, David, if that answers the question. Um, Peace to Ras King. Malik, good question. What was 5% like pre-Allah? We could talk about the Nation of Islam, but I'm going to talk about everything because the major point of this question is like, what is the 5%? Someone that is teaching something for the liberation of our people. Liberation of our people is the freeing toward our culture. Freeing liberation is not just freeing the people of the constraints of oppression. It is also being able to form them to their higher, to be themselves in their truest sense. And what we would call 5% earlier, pre-Allah, is anyone that was teaching something that stripped, to me, it would be to each person, each 5%er's discretion. So I give my understanding of it. Anyone that was eliminating mystery, right, in the plan of action. So in this plan of action, we go from, we decide now, right, now, knowledge of culture, now, or we decide to end something else, that these definitive decisions are being made without the aid or the contributions of any mysterious consultation or any consultation to the mysteries that exist, right? That's a given. And so when I look at the ancient Taoists, when I look at the ancient Zen Buddhists, many of the Sufic orders, I see many of them as 5%. You know, in my lifetime, because not everything is such a, clear-cut issue, there are many people that see this knowledge and cannot live it, and yet they support it, right? I see many of them as 5%ers, in some type of way, but that's my first prerequisite. Someone that has eliminated mystery in how they intend to do things, and the ultimate, and then of course the ultimate goal, the liberation of our people, for us to live that supreme culture, the supreme culture where we are constantly bettering ourselves, building ourselves, right? I hope that answers the question. Um, Quatis said wisdom, action, effort, the implementation of an idea or want. Very interesting. I don't know. I would say that there's a tendency toward corruption if wisdom is the implementation of a want. Even as I say that every form of wisdom is wanted, right? Interesting. The experiment or experience one gains from the ideas. That I see that. Quatis, you said I'm still breaking down the pluses in our works. It's such a strong build. The questions around that are building, but I found it to be very useful. It goes perfectly with today's degree. Yeah, I mean, like I said, like it's why like I come back here and I say, listen, can people engage? Because when I give out a lesson like our works, it is very, very heavy. It is something I still work on. And I don't want to just keep throwing things, you know. That's peace. That's peace, David. Yeah. But it's great to hear from you, Quatis, man. Great. You know, so good questions and stuff, but everybody email me and stuff, okay? Sunez97, SUNEZ 97 at Gmail. It's in the description. You know what I mean? Because I'm very, very, very busy now. You know, this year I was behind in writings from last year, and I don't want to be behind for next year. Okay, so I got to do a lot of writing. I get invited to some really nice shows, and I got to say no. And I've become a real hermit this last half of the year because I really need to achieve these things. And they will. I'm well on the way because the mentality is there. I'm writing with the right mentality, and they'll get done. But yeah, with that said, find ways to recognize the way that you engage. Find, I would love people to start writing out what is their way. What is the way to you? What would be the way of full uprightness? We have to be able to articulate our morals, our ethics, and have an ethos, right? We have to be able to do that, you know, right? Very, very, very crucial. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, that's what it is. And the full uprightness plus lesson, I'll work on that. Just a little thing. It's really nice. The writer workshop, the writer plus lesson, I'm having some difficulties with it. I'm gonna do something with it. I'm gonna leave it without a book list. I was gonna attach a book list, but it's hard because I don't really read books about writers, and I don't want to put books that I didn't read. Um, Not for this. If you want to know what books are, you could try. I could tell you books that have been recommended to me and stuff by writers I respect. But I've read very few books on writing, how to write and stuff. I don't really, I just read, right? So, what else? And of course, still working on the 1 to 10 plus lesson. That one is, I don't think it's going to be as long as it's going to be shorter. I don't want to make it too long, but it's going to be something you could look through and realize the depths and angles of what you've got to study with it. That one I may add some book lists to it, like books that go with it, just to fortify it. But those are some of the things, and of course, yeah. So that'll be what we do. All right. So with that said, I'm gonna let everybody go, and also to do this thing about the way. You got to start articulating the details of your whole schedule. What are you actually doing? What do you keep your word that you will do? All those things count. So with that said, we'll let everybody go until next week. Contact me before. Peace.